Мы живем в демократической стране, притом зажаты двумя демократическими блоками с запада и с востока.
Chased by the deep state, fighting for independence, thinking about revolution, looking for alternative solutions. The enemies of the deep state will tell you what others even don't dare to think. Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski.
Hello, hello, hello. This is the geopolitical podcast, DieGutenMenschen, Public Enemies of the Deep State. My name is Manuel Ochsenreiter. I am editor-in-chief of the German news magazine Zuerst. And on the other side is my friend and colleague Mateusz Piskorski from Poland. Hello, Mateusz. How are the things?
Hello to you and hello to all of the listeners. So we really hope that you found our podcast interesting, and thanks for your feedback and opinions on that.
Yes, I have to say that our podcast about Belarus, 2 podcasts ago, I think it was episode 29, was a very successful one, and that the audience appreciated especially your expertise on Belarus.
Well, I think that both of us have some experience when it comes to monitoring and analyzing the so-called color revolutions in different countries, in different parts of the world. And that when it comes to the events in Belarus, they seem to be quite similar to the events and scenarios which had been used in last decades, not even years, but decades, in different parts of the world. So we can really analyze and find out and then analyze some similarities, of course, and some also small differences and, let's say, modifications of tactics when it comes to organizing such things in different areas of the world. Of course, every color revolution has its own specific characteristics, depending on the cultural background, on history, civilizational background, and so on. But what comes to my mind, and what is quite common for such scenarios, is the fact that more and more representatives, officials of a given regime are somehow, let's say, motivated to abandon the regime portrayed as an evil one and to join the ranks of the so-called opposition. We already, as you have noticed before, we had already such a case when it comes to one ambassador of Belarus. Yes.
Yes. I think in Slovakia, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It was in Bratislava. But well, first and foremost, we remember that, for instance, in Syria, where we were also observing the not only revolution but civil war. I mean, a color revolution, which then became a civil war or a proxy war. Anyway, we have witnessed several dozens of Syrian ambassadors leaving their positions and joining the opposition.
By the way, let me now please interrupt you, because Syria was interesting to me since these operations often didn't seem to be totally professional. I give you just 2 short examples. Example number 1 was the defection of a so-called oil minister, who turned out not to be any minister. I think it was just some CEO or official of British Petrol who gave all of the sudden interviews from Jordan. And number 2, that was also an interesting case, was the defection of, or the elite defection of the Syrian ambassador to France in Paris, a woman who herself all of a sudden heard an interview in the state radio, in the French state radio of her defection with someone who was obviously not her. So she didn't defect in reality. They simply took someone else who gave an interview and claimed it was the ambassador. So there we had some, some incidents of unprofessionalism. But how is it now when it comes to Belarus?
Well, with all the respect to Middle East countries, Belarus is a modern bureaucratic state, yes? I mean, Syria also is such a state, but for instance, it would be very, very hard to compare Belarus with, let's say, Libya or Venezuela, yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it has good traditions of very hierarchical, let's say, structure of post-Soviet bureaucracy, and also the internal control, the system of internal control of the loyalty of reliability of the officials everywhere. Yes, so it's quite a modern structure, which is very hard to destroy, to let's say employ from inside, from within. That's why I think that we won't have many such cases in Belarus as we had with the ambassador of Belarus in Slovakia, that it is rather a single case. Let's say that, of course, the diplomats as a whole are group with the highest risk, yes, when it comes to the defecations from the regime, yes?
Yeah.
For a very simple reason. I mean, these people are every day living abroad. These people are having lots of contacts with very different people, yes, let's say, including the officials, including the secret services of a country they are residing in and of other countries which are residing there. I don't think that it's impossible to avoid such contacts, yes. So they might be, let's say, somehow persuaded to let's say make such a political statement. It's very easy to work with them for other countries, for those who are behind the given color revolution. So they are the first target, or one of the first targets. In case of Belarus, there are two reasons why I don't believe that it will have a massive character. Well, the first reason is that, as I have already told, Belarus has quite a modern and developed bureaucratic and control system within. And the second reason is that we are talking already in our last podcast that some of the people there, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, still think that their boss, Vladimir Makey, who is perceived as very pro-Western, that he is the figure who will be able to replace Lukashenko. So this is another, let's say, factor that is limiting the number of, let's say, rebelled ambassadors and ambassadors ready to leave the regime. Yes, it's very, very simple. And we had a lot of publications in recent weeks, a lot of analyses that really Makey is the guy who is someone who has best contacts, best relations with, for instance, United Kingdom, but also some other Western countries from among all the elites in Belarus.
So these three, and I suggest that he might have really a kind of program, and contrary to the three female poster opposition leaders, which are always now presented in Western media.
I don't know if he has, let's say, a political idea or a political program, but I know because I personally met him several times when he was the chief of the presidential administration of Belarus, and I also know some of the people who are who used to be in very good relations with him. That he's very professional. Yes, he's a professional technocrat. Yes. professional politician, although not charismatic, but let's say just for some period of transformation, for being a kind of temporary head of state, he would be a good candidate for different political circles, not only for, let's say, for the opposition, but also for some others from within the Lukashenko group. So he might be this figure, and that's why I guess that the diplomats will be waiting now, because right today, just more than 1 week after the presidential elections, according to the Belarusian constitution, the government resigned. Officially, it has to resign because a new president, this time, of course, it's not a new president, but a newly re-elected.
A new term, presidential term,
the beginning of the new presidential term, exactly. The president, elected or re-elected president, has to name the new members of the cabinet of ministers of the government. So Lukashenko already announced that basically he doesn't plan any big changes within the cabinet of ministers. Nevertheless, there might be 1 or 2 important changes. We don't know what are his plans, but let's say I know personally that several people are suggesting him since several days that he should get rid of Vladimir Maki.
I have a question when it comes to Lukashenko. The whole world is right now discussing about all the mistakes he committed, and all Western leaders are now calling him a dictator again and so on. But I would like to ask you, it would be, of course, he did mistakes. No one does no mistakes. But was maybe one of the major mistakes of Lukashenko that he wasn't maybe really prepared for a situation which appears right now? Was he maybe feeling too secure regarding the elections before, where always was a little bit turmoil, where always was criticism? Did he think that it will pass by this time as it passed by in the last elections? Was that maybe a mistake he committed?
I cannot give you and our readers, our listeners, the names, but lately I have talked a lot with the people who are, let's say, the advisors of Lukashenko when it comes to his information policy. Yes.
Yeah.
And they are really disappointed because although they were in charge of that, the state structure of Belarus is quite bureaucratic, as we have already told, and that was the reason why the bureaucratic structures, which still are organized into the same departments as they used to be organized in the Soviet times, were very, very hard to adjust them for, let's say, contemporary information area, to contemporary information warfare also, and so on. So I'll give you an example. Belarus is one of very, very few countries which was completely inactive when it comes to using social media, yes?
Yeah.
Every country, this is not about Russia, about trolls, internet trolling, and so on, but every country I know, contemporary country I know, has its own, let's say, companies, external companies who are in charge of PR, of making a good work and good job in social media, in different channels, who are using also the fake accounts and so on, who are using the bots system, the bots technology, and so on. But the Belarusians did not have that, yes? That was also the problem, I guess. If you read the numbers of the followers in different social media of let's say, opposition resources and compare them to the number of followers of the official sites or profiles of government structures, you will find a terrible difference. Of course, the difference will be in surplus for the opposition. Yes.
Yeah, there is no counterweight at all when it comes to the media. I mean, everything we see in the West is really only opposition-related media. There is no counterweight.
You know, but this is something. I mean, only Russia, to some extent, has managed, and partly also China, yes, but we are talking about superpowers. Only they have, to a very, very small extent, in my opinion, managed to create some alternative media resources.
Yes.
When it comes to, by the way, there was also, of course, two smaller countries, but still, let's say, quite rich when it comes to financial possibilities some time ago. I mean, Iran, which also tried to create some alternative media, and Venezuela, of course, with the Telesur project. Belarus was and is not so big and doesn't have such financial capabilities, possibilities and potential to organize such a thing. The only thing they do now actually is that the state news agency Belta publishes some materials in some articles, some reports in English and in some other languages, although they do it very, very late. So, for instance, when I asked, because when there was a pro-Lukashenko demonstration in Minsk, I tried to ask some people from there to give me some basic information on that for the Western media, yes?
Yeah.
And I found that they have prepared the basic information only after several hours, only after the meeting in support of Lukashenko already ended, was already finished. Meanwhile, the opposition was already filling live all the content into social media and so on. Yes, so they are controlling completely the social media. I mean those who are coordinating the color revolution and so on, and the state is controlling nothing. I think this is a very important. Very, very important experience for the future for all the state structures which are in danger or threatened by different color revolutions, that they should really prepare when it comes to social and let's say to the sector of the new media, yes, to different channels of passing their information to counter. Also to counter the fake news which are spread by the opposition. We had a lot of examples of fake news when it comes to Belarus. We had, for example, I don't know if it was also used in Germany, by the way, but some days ago, all people in Poland who are watching the state TV in Poland could see pictures of mass demonstrations about, I don't know, 500,000 people demonstrating and so on, demonstrating by night. Yeah. So the picture was, not very clear for anyone, but there were some amateurs, some people, of course not in Belarus and not the Belarusians, but some local journalists here in Poland found out that actually this was a picture taken about 12 years ago. Yes, 12 years ago in South Korea, in Seoul. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
But it was dark. Yes, it was dark, so no one would recognize and see any difference between Minsk and Seoul. So the people were, bombarded with such fake news and fake pictures everywhere.
I remember one. Sorry if I interrupt. I remember one similar case from 2011 in Syria, where all the Western media were spreading huge protests in Damascus and labeling them as anti-government protests, while in reality these were marches and meetings and gatherings in support of the government. so they were just mislabeled. Yeah,
I had similar experience in Syria, and people were unable to read Arabic, so they couldn't recognize, and see any difference. There were just some Arabic letters on that and so on, But in this case, South Korea is very far from Belarus culturally, let's say geographically, and even in terms of civilization, so they are doing things like that. Another thing was that when it comes to fake news, that there were, for instance, some pictures of electoral bulletins, the ballots, clear, or those ballots who are in favor of Tikhanovskaya, of the main opposition candidate, which were burned.
Yeah.
So you can see all those pictures in social media as well. But please take a look on them, and if you'll take a look on them, you'll find out that there are no official stamps of the Electoral Commission on them. So everyone, including me and you and our listeners, can just put on a printer and print such ballots. And
of course, yes.
It's quite easy. And that was used as a picture. I mean, as a picture to become an evidence of mass falsifications, of burning the ballots of those voters who supported the opposition candidate, and so on and so on. So the technology is very, very simple. Also, the countering of this technology should be simple. Nevertheless, it seems that, from that point of view, at least when it comes to the internet, which is most important now, the Belarusian state was not prepared enough. So I agree with you. They were not prepared, and that is a lesson to be learned by other countries in the future.
And I mean, I think the major point is what we also see now. You cannot create a counter media landscape for a media war within a week or maybe with even a year. These are things they have to prepare, they have to grow, they have to be trained. I mean, if we look, what are the opponents doing? What is happening there? We see institutes, we see foundations, we see a huge number of different organizations grooming, preparing, and educating these journalists and information warriors, we have to call it. So that would be my next question. When it comes to Belarus, we spoke already last time a bit about the foreign influence, and you told, well, especially also about activists coming from your country, from Poland, but of course also from the Baltic states. What is the knowledge today, totally now absent from any state propaganda or so, but what do we know about foreign support and foreign influence and foreign meddling in the recent situation in Belarus?
Well, it's quite obvious, yes. I mean, first and foremost, we are already talking about the different ways to, let's say, to inspire and to support the color revolution by the foreigners. Yes, we are talking about the people who are just giving instructions. So let's say the planners and the intellectuals who are coming there. Yes. Like you remember, we have mentioned Timothy Snyder, of course, who is not, who is not a street fighter probably, but he gives the instructions. Maybe he gives money as well. I don't know. Nevertheless, there are people like that, and there are people who are just showing the hooligans on the streets how to fight, how to efficiently fight the police and so on. So there are very, very different types of, let's say, external foreign volunteers. Of course, I'm joking that they are volunteers. They are
mercenaries. I mean, we speak about that, yeah.
They are well-paid mercenaries. Yes.
Yes.
So there are different types of them, of course. As in every army, there are different specializations, let's say, and professions within. On the other hand, there is also, Belarus is also an example of another kind of intervention. We are also discussing about that. There are some radio channels and TV channels which are operating from the territory of Poland, but also Lithuania, to some extent also Ukraine, and which are able to reach a number of listeners and viewers in Belarus. Yes, so it's also very easy for some neighboring countries to create a very simple traditional TV channel, yes, or radio channel to cover some part of a territory. This is a more traditional way of interfering, and this is of course targeted mainly on elderly people or those people who are not using internet, but this also becomes sometimes a good alternative in times when the authorities switch off the internet, yes?
Yeah. So
there are still available some traditional methods which are working regardless of internet. And here for instance, the biggest initiative of that type when it comes to Belarus is TV channel Bielsat, which is run by
That
Poland.
is in Poland, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's based in Poland, but it's funded by not only the Polish government, but also some other governments, as well as some Western foundations, NGOs, and so on. So they have a group of opposition followers from Belarus who are making some simple materials, video materials from there. Then they are publishing it, editing it, and showing it on their channel for the Belarusian viewers. And they have also a group of Belarusians working for them in Poland. Yes.
Just a moment. I think when it comes to Belsat, sorry, I this time I interrupt all the time, but it's not impolite. But I think it's important because Belsat TV is, I think, like a role model how this works. First of all, Belsat was created already 13 years ago in 2007. I think that is the first thing where we see, of course, they are prepared not since last week and not since a year, but since many years. Belsat is a product with the cooperation of the Polish government and the Polish state TV, TVP. You know, if Telewizja Polska or so, right? Did I pronounce? Yes. Yeah. Did I pronounce it right? And
that is perfect. Yeah.
And I know that. And Belsat as well is getting funds from the European Union, and one has to imagine that they have a budget, and now you have to tell me how much it is, of in 2008 the budget was 27 million zloty. How much is that in euro? I don't know.
No, it was around, at that time it was around 8-9 million euro, but it was the official budget only.
Of course. And
they had a lot of more funding, yes.
And the main part of this was given by the Polish Foreign Ministry. So the Polish taxpayer was financing that. But it is, and of course there are cooperations with Radio Svoboda and with all these pro-Western stations. But I think Belsat TV is a very, very good example how these things work. And they work in long term, and they don't work just when an event happens and then clap the hands and now we have everything. These things are long-term planned operations.
Yes, exactly. And even if you look at the internet, I mean, if you would analyze the activity of the husband of the main presidential opposition candidate, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Her husband, Sergei Tikhanovsky, used to be one of the most influential bloggers in Belarus. Of course, as we both know, his blog was supported by several Western foundations, and his activity was quite well paid by the West, by his partners. And he was running his blog very actively since at least 2 years. Yes, his internet blog and video blog, which made him quite recognizable and popular. So we see that even in the internet, to create a brand, to gain some followers and so on, you need to have time. So you are totally right. Just to conclude this part of our discussion, you are totally right that any government which tries to somehow counter the color revolution has to think about the potential of a color revolution many years before it really happens, because even now, let's imagine that, for instance, there is a new leadership of the Ministry of Information of Belarus, yes, and you are the Minister of Information, Manuel, there. And what could you do now? I mean, it's too late, yes?
Yes, and now you cannot even react. You cannot even react right now, yes?
You cannot react because you don't have the channels and the instruments, and it's too late to create them, yes?
You can make a stupid TV presence with a short speech, and you can be sure that almost no one will see it.
Yes.
That's all.
And that is the real problem they have, yes? Well, let's see. I think that in our next discussion, at our next meeting, we'll discuss also some other important points and elements of the whole crisis. I think that one of them is also that element connected to the economy and to the big factories which are going to strike or which are not going to strike. We still don't know what is the real level of support for Lukashenko among the simple workers, as they used to be his electoral base before, yes? But these are the things we are monitoring and looking at now, and I guess that in about 2 days we'll be able, of course, if our listeners are still interested and will be interested in the topic of Belarus, we'll be able to tell them about that.
But to conclude that, but here we go, that in reality, we don't really know what is happening there. We just know right now the perspective of the opposition channels. But we don't know the other side, simply because the other side doesn't manage, or maybe in some parts, maybe doesn't even attempt right now to manage to get somehow through this steel beton wall of silence, which is built around them by the opposition media, by the long-term groomed close to opposition media. I mean, that is quite interesting that while everyone in Europe who is interested in the events in Belarus feels fully informed, because we get the pictures, we get the comments, interviews with opposition people, but in reality, nobody is really informed. I think that is how we can conclude that.
Yes, of course, and this is the problem. I mean, you and me, we have always tried to find the facts which are hidden behind the official pictures showed in TV channels or internet, but we both know how much work did it cost, how hard is it, how difficult is it, yes, even for us, regardless the fact that we are into such topics since several years. So now imagine ordinary TV watcher or internet reader somewhere who is not very keen and not very interested in the politics of Eastern Europe and post-Soviet area. So how can they get any kind of information? They get only the propaganda, of course, of one of the sides. So that shows really the importance of the new media, the social media, which should be used by also by those who want to avoid color revolutions.
Yes, and we see, I think, very perfectly that we are not anymore speaking about some kind of problem of media balance or of balanced information, that we really speak about a kind of media war, and or a war where the media is one of the very important battlefields, and we should be always aware that this kind of media war can always sweep to Europe, and it can hit us as well when it comes maybe to future events. I think this is very important to have a close look to the events in Belarus, to analyze how the information policy they're working, or as we see not working, and how to translate this and how to learn out of this for the future, also when it comes to future Europe.
Yes, I totally agree, and well, let's hope that we can give you to our listeners, we can give several more examples of how the Belarusian information channels from the government work, because now they don't work, as you have noticed. Yes, let's see in the coming days if they will anyway try, although it's too late, as we have already told, but if they will anyway make some effort, an attempt to somehow correct the situation, to use some channels they still can use.
For our listeners, we will for sure either tomorrow or day after tomorrow again speak about Belarus, and will analyze the recent events, because this is maybe beside Corona one of the most important events within this year.
Well, I think all of our listeners who are into geopolitics should be and are interested in Belarus. So let's come back to this topic very soon.
That is what we will do. Thank you so much, and goodbye. We talk very soon.
Thanks a lot, and hear you soon. Bye.
This program was presented to you by Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski, the hottest dissident who won't violate any time the global rules against racism, extremism, or any other bad isms.